Good. I had my mic over there because I was recording yesterday. I'm working on a video for you guys. Sergio says hi. Welcome, Sergio. Nice and early here. And let's see. So, if you guys have any questions, as always, that's what we're here for. Let me open up some comments. I can talk about some stuff. Stoof stuff. Comments. Okay. Any help to review? Nope. Close. Okay. So we had a question yesterday that I can talk about. And that was from Allison Silva. And they asked, can you make a video or explain right here about the exact correct and easiest way to pronounce the words email and while? And then specifically for the word while, a question about how it's pronounced in a particular song, which I looked up, and there's some singing in it. Hello, Sergio. Welcome. Let me know if you have any questions. If you guys can hear me well. Theris is also here. Welcome, Theris. So email and while, these use L-colored diphthongs. And if you haven't seen my lessons on the L-colored vowels, you can go check that out. Hello, David. How are you? It's Brittany's 40th birthday today. 40, God, wow. That makes me feel kind of old. Anyway, yeah, well, I guess happy birthday, Brittany. Yeah. So before I answer Sergio's question, I want to get to this really quick, just so it's recorded, because I don't know if Allison is going to see this, but it can also help you guys as well. The L-colored vowels, I have lessons on that with lots of examples. But email uses the A diphthong, which it could actually be reduced to more like or you can like cut the diphthong to use just the first part, the part, instead of like email, mail, it's fine. I forgot to mention that in my answer, but so there's variation here. But it's supposed to be right perfectly. It's L colored, which would be ale, email, mail. Now, as usual with most of the L colored vowels, you can usually add a small W or a small Y depending on what the vowel is. Here we're going from A to the L, half L vowel sound. This is one reason I call it a vowel sound. You can put a small little Y between the A and the ul and say ale, instead of ale, and so you don't blend them. Still just one syllable, but it's sort of stretches it out a bit more. So we can say email, that's blended, or email, mail. Okay, so not quite blended. While is exactly the same, except instead of A, it uses I. So that's the only difference. So I'll, blended, or I'll with a small little Y. Again, don't say I'll or I'll with like a full Y. That's not going to work. Okay. Gabriel's here. Welcome, Gabriel. Hope you're doing well. Okay, Sergio's question, is it possible to omit the T in words like opt, apt, or act? Off the top of my head, by default, I'm going to say no. But is there anything we can do with those depending? Let's see. So you can opt not to do it. You can opt not to do it. Opt not. Okay, you can... opt. Okay, let's say apt. He's quite apt when it comes. He's quite apt when it comes. Apt when it comes. He's quite apt when it comes to that. Act. Put on a really good act, but okay. So what you can do for opt and apt, I think we really usually keep those T's, especially because they're less common words. But what you can do, depending on what's after it, With opt, like if I say opt not, you can opt not. So instead of actually pushing out that T, I go into the P and the T at the same time. And I sort of like stop that P. I sort of release the lips with the tongue still there and then push the N out. Up, not, up, not. So it's sort of like, it's sort of a weird transition. You could do that. If you say up to, again, sort of the same thing. Again, if you say opt out, you can opt out. Okay. It wants to kind of link as sort of that weird D type sound. So again, it depends. In isolation, perfectly pronounced, no, you can't drop the T. But depending on what it's linking to, yes, you can maybe stop it. I wouldn't say completely drop it. So it could be stopped, not dropped. That's what I would say. Maybe in faster, lazier speech or in certain conditions, potentially, maybe you could drop the T. If you have any specific example sentences that you want to give me, that maybe like you're getting these from context or whatever, then I can look at those specifically. But I'm going to say don't completely drop the T, but you can stop the T. Okay, Theris. If that's the same song, I checked it, and she said, "What's happening?" She dropped both H and P Y. If that's the same song, which song? I don't know if you sent a link, but remember, I can't see links. YouTube will not send the links to me in the chat, unless you're referring to the comment that was made that I was talking about with Email in a While, and it was a song After the Love Has Gone by Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's the only context I have for a song here. So yeah, if you can clarify which song and perhaps a timestamp, that would be very helpful. I'll come back to that. Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, because I think Daniela asked about that one last time. I still don't even know what Snow the Product means. Okay, I'll look that up. Do you have like a timestamp of about where that would be? Is it just at the beginning? Okay, YouTube. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those. So the product, one with the most views. Well, there's one with John Z that has more views. There's one by Butter that has even more views. I assume, I don't even know. Like, I don't get what. Okay, so apparently Snow the Product is the name of the artist. I'm so confused. What's the artist? Is the artist Snow the Product, and then what's the song? I don't get it. I'm really confused here. Yeah, I'm gonna need, I guess, the name of the song when she starts to sing. Okay, yeah. I'll come back to that. It's not my type of song though, but I liked what she did there. English and Spanish, incredible. Bilingual people are fascinating. Okay, so for start, David, come on. For start, that's bad grammar. Okay, so another product, BZRP Music Sessions, number 39. That's the title. Okay, I think I see that one here. Yeah, BZRP Music. Okay. Yeah, somebody asked me about this exact one before. Okay, and you're talking about what's happening. She dropped both the H and the P. Let's see. Okay. So the dropping the H, dropping the H, that was probably very loud, sorry, is very, very standard. It's very, very normal. H's, so H is only pronounced at the start of a syllable. It's obviously used in many, many places, but it's not always an H sound. Like SH is not S plus H, it's sh. That's just spelled with an H. But if you have an actual H sound at the start of a word, especially if it's an unstressed syllable, if there's nothing before it, like I say, he likes it, you have to say the H, right? You can't just say he likes it. But if there's anything before it, a consonant, a vowel, whatever, that can sort of link to the sound after the H, because remember, the H is just breath. That's all it is. We will commonly drop the H. Okay, you don't have to. And if that syllable is stressed, it's a little more likely that we won't drop the H. But you can drop it either way. It doesn't really matter. So that's just a super common standard thing. So what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Okay. Now for the P, let me double check how she did this. What's happening? Let me see. No, don't go to the next one. Go back. Yeah. What's happening? How did she do that? What's happening? So she's doing more of like a sort of like a held T. What's happening? Almost kind of like a held D, because there's a little bit of voice there. That sounds very hip hop, very, I guess, African American vernacular type thing, which, as I've said many times, is fine in itself. That's not standard. So I would chalk that up to regional dialect. It's like hip hop style, not normal standard American speech. We wouldn't do that. We can stop the P. We could say what's happening. And just like you can do mountain, where you go like mountain instead of saying mountain, what's happening. You could do that. That's okay. But she's not even doing that. She's not closing her lips. She's doing more of like a T, like a held T. So even then, I don't think we tend to stop the P like that. We'll probably push the P out like what's happening, happen. There's gonna be like a weak P there usually, but it could stop. Yes. Okay, so that answers that. And yeah, I listened to a bit of that before, and I was just like, yeah, going in and out of Spanish and English. That's really cool. I like that. So David, okay, so for starters, we could say that for starters or to start, but not for start. For start would never go together. I have a grammar question. I know, never thought I'd ask one. Oh my God. It's kind of ironic that when you have a grammar question, you actually make a grammar mistake. A rare miss. I had a bit of a brain fart the other day and couldn't decide which one of these is correct. How did I never notice this? Okay. I'm actually kind of surprised because this is very basic, but it happens. So, okay, remember, noticed would be past tense. And we're saying did, which creates the past tense because it's a question. So it's already changed into the past tense, which means you cannot say noticed anymore because now you're doing past, like for the same verb, and it doesn't work. So how did I never notice this? That would be correct. Of course, if it wasn't a question, you say, I never noticed this as a statement, then that makes it the past because there's no did there. Okay, good. Pronunciation question. How do you, meaning me, pronounce these two words? Well, I assume that I pronounce them the way everybody else pronounces them, but, maybe there's other ways to pronounce them. Capybara. I think some people say capybara, which is a little bit weird to me, but I've heard that a lot. Capybara. And chassis. The second S is silent. Chassis. Okay, you can literally hear both. At least I can. Talking about the H and the P. Is that based on that previous thing? I don't know. Okay, Wendell here with a bunch of questions. Good job, Wendell. Lots and lots of questions. Very good. That's what we're here for. I think these are all the questions that Wendell gathered for the week, and just bam, here we are. All right. So, and other people, of course, don't be afraid to jump in. We still have plenty of time at this point. So, how do people having the mainstream general American accent pronounce the word on, like that on? Okay, when you say the mainstream general American accent, that is, I think, based on some false assumptions. As I've talked about before in my video about the neutral American accent, there is not one neutral American accent. There are several neutral American accents. So when you say the mainstream general American accent, there's very slight variations in some little details that aren't enough to make it sound like an accent necessarily, even though it is technically an accent. All Americans, regardless of where they're from, have at least a slight accent compared to other Americans. There is no like one neutral standard and then everybody else has an accent. No, we all have a slight little accent, and then some of us have more of an accent. Like if you're from the South, that's obviously very different, very distinct. But most Americans will have some little tiny accent compared to other Americans. It's just not noticeable enough. It's not big enough for us to say that it's not neutral. So on is a good example. It's a good question. I think I know where this is coming from. So with on, if you have the cot merger, which I do, and as I've said before, is something that has been spreading across the country over the last however many decades. A decade is 10 years, so multiple sets of multiple 10-year periods, say 40 years or something. It has been spreading across the country. And so more and more people, regardless of where they're from in the United States, are using the cot merger as just their natural pronunciation. People who don't have the cot merger would have two different sounds here. And if I remember correctly, on should be the aw, that backward C in IPA. And so it would be like on, something like that. If you do have the cot merger, then remember ah and aw become one sound, ah, and it's just on. So that's the way I pronounce it. Nice and easy. That's the way I teach you guys, because it's the English Hacks easier way that still sounds perfectly natural and neutral. So technically there's two answers there. It depends on if they have the cot merger or not. Okay, what's the logic of the preposition? Wrong word there, preparation. It's probably a typo. Of the preposition on in this phrase, on the farm. I don't find any logic, or is it an idiomatic phrase? Okay, so when we think of a farm, because you might want to say in the farm, right? Or at the farm. And depending on what we're talking about, we will use a different preposition. If you're thinking of the farm as a location, like say you have a farm, I'm going to visit you, right? I will probably say, okay, I will see you at the farm. Okay. You could still use on in that context. There's a slight little difference. It would be clear either way. But if you're thinking of it as a location, like at the store, at the beach, at the farm, okay, at would be fine. But we often use on with farm because that's a good question. Farm specifically, why don't we do that? So a farm, usually you have a house. You'll usually have a field or some animals or something. And farm, whether it's for animals or crops or both, farm land, right? A farm is a piece of land that is used for raising or growing food, whether that's animal food, right? We're growing animals for food or growing plants for food. And so you live on land, right? We are on land, it's a surface. And so we say on the farm because we're thinking of it as a surface, as a land that you grow food on top of, right? It comes out of the ground, or the animals are on the ground, but that's the basic idea. So it's I would say it's based on the idea of being on land, but then farm specifically means that the land is being used for food, to make food. So it's just an extension of on the land. Yeah. What's the difference between theme and topic? Are they synonymous? No. They can be quite similar. A topic is like okay, if we're talking about prepositions, prepositions are the topic, right? That's what we're talking about. So it's a topic. A theme would be, let's see how I can explain this without looking up an actual definition. A theme would be some sort of either recurring thing that happens like within a story, or it could be some type of, what am I trying to think of here? Some sort of like stylized setup. So, for example, in a story, right, a story might have certain themes, right? Like maybe there's different points in the story that talk about or that are related to death. So death would be like a theme. Now death would be a topic within the story, but the theme would be like, okay, that's part of what the story is about, rather than just like one thing the story talks about. Um, or when I talk about sort of like a stylized setup of sorts. So let's say you go to a party and it's I mean, a very basic, a Halloween party. Halloween is the theme, right? But let's say 1950s America, right, where women had certain hairstyles and the classic cars and everything. Let's say you go to a party and it's a 50s theme. That means that everybody who goes to the party should dress like they are from the 50s, right? So you dress up in like a 50s costume, pretending you're from the 50s. That would be the theme of the party. That has nothing to do with the topic. Very abstractly, I guess you could say it's related, but not quite. So depends on how it's used. They can be similar, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're synonyms. You can go to the dictionary too and look that up. I had a teacher who would say not to use the expression gonna wanna when speaking in the university classes. Are they normal in that context? Why so many professionals use them? Okay, so this is a good point. I've mentioned several times in several of my videos that gonna and wanna are not necessarily informal. Sometimes they can kind of sound informal. It's really hard to determine exactly when that is, but generally they're just a normal part of speech. Okay. Teachers are the most likely people to tell you not to use those when you're in a formal setting. And even you said why do so many, we missed the word do, why do so many professionals use them? Because that's a normal part of speech. There's this sort of perfect, right, proper language that you should use in formal settings, and that's what most teachers will teach you. I'm trying to teach you real English, that and if it is something that's for more formal situations or something that's for more informal situations, I will tell you. But I'm trying to teach you real English regardless of what's like proper or whatever. Gonna and wanna are just standard spoken reductions that are perfectly normal and used generally in any type of context or formality. It's just like saying have to. It's a sort of a reduction of have to. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a normal part of speech. It's how we usually say have and to together, have to. Now, if you're writing, of course, don't write them. If you're texting a friend, you can write gonna or wanna or whatever, but they don't look good in writing. So you're not supposed to write them, especially like if you're writing an academic paper, definitely not. Okay. Formal writing is its own little world. That's different than regular writing. That's different than formal speech. That's different than normal speech. That's a whole different topic. I very strongly disagree with teachers who tell you things like this. And I think it comes from one of two places, or maybe both. One is either they're sort of grammar police, and they want you to speak the language properly or whatever, at least in that type of formal situation. well, even university class isn't necessarily super formal, because American culture is generally much less formal than other cultures, even other English-speaking cultures. But that aside, the other place where it could be coming from is the teacher wants to give you the safest option. And so because potentially maybe in the right situation, gonna and wanna might kind of sound more informal. It's like, okay, well, this person's not a native, so I'm just going to tell them, okay, if you're in a formal situation, if you're in a university class, never use them, to be safe. And they won't tell you to be safe. They'll just say, don't use them. But that could be where it's coming from. Where my position on that is, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's not going to have any impact on formality. It's just a normal part of speech. So, yeah. Now, if you combine it with broken grammar, which is used more informally, like instead of saying, why do you want to do that? If you say, why do you want to do that? That's normal speech. There's no problem with wanna there. Okay, it doesn't matter. You can be at work, it doesn't matter. But if you say why you want to do that, where you drop the do, now it sounds like broken grammar, and it makes it sound much more informal. Why you want to do that. And it makes it sound a little more playful, like really hard to describe that, but it sounds a little more playful, like you're not as serious, like, oh man, why you want to do that? Like, come on, whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So that's its own little context there. But if you use wanna with dropping the do, then if I say why you want to do that, see, now using want to and not using wanna, it kind of sounds out of place because I'm already breaking the grammar. So wanna in combination with the broken grammar will make it sound generally less formal, but it's mostly because you're breaking the grammar, not because you're saying wanna. It just fits really well with it. So yeah, anyway, it's a whole little topic, a little complicated, but and I will say personally, me, like in university, like classes that I've taken, I speak like a normal human being. I say gonna, I say wanna, I say have to. It's just normal speech. So nobody looks at me like, oh yeah, how informal, the barbarity. No. In fact, my professors have said gonna and wanna. Like it's just a normal part of speech. How do you pronounce Omicron? Like that Omicron? Good question. Hopefully, I don't get any any strikes on my monetization, because obviously this is a sensitive topic on the YouTubes. How do you pronounce Omicron? Any rules to do so? Why is the first O in Omicron not as an O in hot? So Omicron. Remember, I used the merger. Omicron. Some people might say it that way. Really, so a word like this, if a native were to read it, right? Because like the scientist said, oh, it's Omicron, right? And apparently that's how we say that word. But if a native were never heard that word and we saw this word, we wouldn't know, should you pronounce it O or should you pronounce it ah? We would have no idea, and people would just pick one. So you might hear some people say Omicron. There are even people adding an N, saying Omnicron or Omnicron, even though there's no N there. So why is it an O? Just because that's the way the scientists chose to say it. I don't know. Maybe that's I think it's based on like the Greek letters and stuff. And maybe that's like the traditional way to say that particular letter. I don't know, because there was like the delta, and I don't care. I don't follow all of that in detail. But apparently that's just the way you say it. There's no rule. There's no rule. Maybe if there is a rule, it doesn't matter. So yeah, because if it were OMNI, which is a suffix meaning like all, so like we say, traditionally in Christian thought, God is omnipotent or omnipotent. It's supposed to be omnipotent, changes the pronunciation a little bit when you put them together, but omni means all, so like all powerful, right? Now in the word omni, it's not omni, it's omni. So just adding that N there, now all of a sudden it's an ah. See, it's not because it's like om or something. It's just it's just how things are pronounced. Focus on your ears. Just learn things based on how people actually speak, instead of trying to memorize a bunch of little specific rules. Why not a long O in the first and a short in the second? Yeah, so same thing as I said. Exactly everything I just said. That also applies to the second O. With the second O, I will say that if there were a silent E at the end, then we would probably say crone, because that's a common spelling thing. If you see O by itself, most commonly O by itself is ah. Sometimes it's O, sometimes it's something else. But it's actually very commonly ah. And if you put a silent E at the end, that's a common spelling pattern that will change that O into an actual O sound. I know it's stupid. It's English. It doesn't really matter. Are 7-year-old children already able to say the S plural ending of words with Z sound as an adult native speaker? Can I say the S in the word words? Z sound? Okay, so say the ES plural ending of words with Z sound. I'm kind of confused at the question. Maybe I think your second question is related to it. Can I say the S in the word words with the Z sound without ending or shifting to an S sound, as you said? Okay, so all right, I think there's a little bit of confusion based on something I was talking about before. Fully enunciated, the proper full way to say the word words, plural, is with a Z, because D plus S, it usually, not always, there are exceptions, but usually if the sound before that final S is voiced, it's going to make it into a Z sound because Z is voiced. So it's words, words, z, z. What I was talking about before is end of word partial devoicing. Remember, it's not full devoicing. You can't say words, okay? You have to start in the Z, and then you can end up dropping that voice towards the end of it, and it'll actually turn into a bit of an S, but you have to start in the Z. Words, that's fine. Do you have to do that? I don't really think so. It's something that we commonly do if we're not like super clearly enunciating. So I'm not 100% sure if it's required to sound native. I don't think it is, but it might be. But the full clear way to pronounce the word would be with a Z. Yeah. As for the 7-year-old children question, let's see. So I guess like beaches, we say beaches. I'm not a complete expert on like the developmental levels and like what usually happens when, but I would say yes, a 7-year-old child should definitely be at the point where they have naturally acquired that. And that's one of the reasons why I tell you guys to focus on your ears and not your eyes, because although, yes, children are different and they can absorb the language more easily, if you actually develop your ears and mouth and focus on the mechanics of the language and observing how people actually speak, just like you would as a child, you're going to start, eventually, you're going to start absorbing some of these patterns and things. And like if you were trying to say like beaches, it just wouldn't sound right to you because of general patterns and stuff. And we know, as we were talking about with like Omicron, we know that sometimes there's not sufficient patterns to where like maybe there's one of two possible options if we've never heard it pronounced. And that's just because English isn't spelled phonetically. But there are a lot of patterns that we tend to absorb very naturally as children, and you can mimic that process probably a little bit more slowly, but you can mimic that process by focusing on actually observing the language, how it's actually spoken, and training your ears instead of trying to learn a bunch of rules. Okay, some of the bigger rules, very useful. A lot of the smaller little rules like this, not very useful for the most part. You want to focus on actually the language itself, not the description of the language, which are the rules. What's the difference between theme and topic? Oh, wait, I already answered that one. I had a teacher who would... Wait, did I already answer these? You reposted the same questions. Sorry, I've already answered those. So yes, and as I've said before, please do not repost the same questions. Yeah, okay. Moving on. Oh my God, not you dragging me all the way to San Diego for the grammar mistakes, yeah. In the song White Mustang by Lana Del Rey, she sings the phrase White Mustang, but during the chorus 140, you can hear Why Am I Staying or White Mustang. Let the song play for a while so you can catch it. Okay, White Mustang, Lana Del Rey. White Mustang, Lana Del Rey. Okay, one thing I will say, I've heard some of Lana Del Rey's music. I don't listen to her a whole lot personally. Based on listening to this specific song, the way that she's saying the words is already kind of unclear and sort of slurred, like she's not enunciating very clearly, which for the way that she sings and for the music that she's making, it fits really well. But keep that in mind. So there's already something that's maybe a little off from standard speech. I see what's in the chorus. I see what you're saying. Okay. The day I saw your white Mustang. Okay. So the reason now, I would probably, there's a chance that a native might interpret it that way, but knowing that the name of the song is White Mustang, that would already prime our brain to interpret it that way. Where if we didn't know the name of the song and we just heard her say that little clip, a native might interpret it either way, depending on how the brain hears it, because of the way that she's singing it. So because you mentioned it, I can hear why you would say that it sounds kind of like she's saying, why am I staying? But that has nothing to do with the pronunciation of the words themselves, like White Mustang, which we probably stop the T or maybe drop the T. If we stop it, it would be White Mustang, White Mustang, White Mustang. Or if we drop it, Why Mustang, Why Mustang. That'd be like really fast speech. We're most likely going to stop that T. But because she's singing, and number one, I already said it's a little bit slurred, a little bit dragged out because of the music and just how she sings. That combined with trying to match the music itself, right? She's not saying, when I saw you, at, whatever the line was, I saw you in that white Mustang, right? I saw you in that white Mustang. That's how it would normally sound, which doesn't sound like I saw you in that. Why am I staying? So it's very different. But because of how she's singing, because of how the music is, she's like, why Mustang? And it can sound kind of similar. So it's largely because of the music and just how she's pronouncing the language, which is already not the way we would normally speak standard. So interesting observation. Yeah. Do you have a word to represent? No E at the end of represent. Do you have a word to represent in all cases and circumstances? I tried to say something like that once, but I couldn't find a word to say it without extending too much. Can't remember the context though. So in all cases and circumstances, I think in Spanish, like de todos modos would be something like that. Still a little unclear on the use of that, but in all cases and circumstances, I think we probably do. Nothing's coming to my mind immediately. I mean, if we wanted to make it very explicitly clear, we'd probably say something like that, like in all cases and circumstances. A little less explicit might be like in any case, but that can also, like if you say in any case, it sounds kind of like this, where if you say in any case, it sounds like, okay, well, whatever, that doesn't really matter because this is the important thing. So the intonation will actually affect the actual meaning of that phrase. Yeah, I'm not thinking of anything off the top of my head, but context is super important. So if you can remember the context, that would help. It's almost 3 p.m. You need to cut back on the caffeine. I wonder if it still would be correct if I deleted the word the. Cut back on something, cut back on caffeine. You need to cut back on caffeine. Okay, good question. Remember the articles, or so whether it's the, a/an, or no article, those are the three choices, right? Sometimes it doesn't make much of a difference and they're interchangeable. But usually, all right, one of those, either say not using the word the when you're supposed to will just sound like broken grammar, or the difference between, say, the or no article could create a different meaning, a slightly different meaning. And so the articles have a feeling, they have a purpose. They're not just a bunch of rules. They actually they have a dynamic role in the language depending on exactly what you're trying to say. So if you say cut, so the standard phrase for the phrasal verb cut back on is something. It's not the something. Okay. Here in this context, if you say you need to cut back on caffeine, that sounds like in general, just like regardless of, it doesn't matter that right now it's 3 p.m., just like you drink too much caffeine in general. Where if you say it's almost 3 p.m., that's the context. Okay, so it's kind of late. If you drink too much caffeine, you won't be able to sleep. That's the implication of the context. So you need to cut back on the caffeine, meaning like the caffeine as a specific thing that you have been drinking throughout the day that you should no longer be drinking because you won't be able to sleep. So we don't think of it as like the caffeine in the exact same way as like the man that I see. It doesn't feel quite the same, but it's a similar function of the, that gives a different meaning than with no article. It makes it sound a little more specific to like this day, this context, this time, instead of just in general. Good question. I'm horrible when it comes to listening to song lyrics. Fluent American. Okay, well, yeah, there's some songs where like, you know, when I was in like high school, you know, like I would listen to songs and I would always think it was this. And then like, it's like years later, I would find out, oh, they're actually saying this. And I was saying this the whole time. Sometimes in songs, especially like if the instruments sort of clash with the voice at a certain point, even for us natives, like it can be very difficult to actually hear what they're specifically saying. And we might sort of hear it as something else or interpret it as something else. And I think that can happen in any language, but yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes that happens. So that might be why, but having the music, I think for some people's brains, because music, I don't know the exact brain regions. If I remember, I think music and language have some shared brain regions, but they work on different brain regions. I'm not a neuroscientist, but obviously the presence of music, even just like as background noise against the language, can make things more difficult for certain people to understand. You know, in a foreign language, it just adds to the difficulty of trying to like catch the words in the flow. So that's normal. Oh my God, no, Mr. Fluent American himself. Yeah, who is, no offense, but who is Fluent American? I don't think I've heard of you. Apparently David has. Toddler's actually napping for once. Oh, good. Yeah, I don't have any kids, so I don't know what that's like, but I imagine I imagine that's crazy. Good, you can finally be at peace for once. You need to make more videos with your twin brother. Message retracted. Okay, really agree with what you're saying about formal, informal. Okay, cool. Thank you. glad you agree. It's always nice when another person agrees. Have to head out. Take care. Oh, great question about developmental levels with kids and language. Cool. Well, I assume you're gone by now, but thank you for stopping by, and good luck with the. Oh, I see that I missed one. I'm working on. Unfortunately, he's in New York. Okay. Yeah, thanks for stopping by and joining the chat here. Interesting. Yeah, I guess I'll have to check out that channel and see what's going on there. But yeah, and good luck with the toddler. Okay, interesting. I think that's the first time that's ever happened on my channel, like another channel dropping in. So I'll have to go check that out. Some things I encountered in some songs I'd like to check with you. In a Nicki Minaj song, Only, I noticed two things. My man, full, he just ate. Full sounds like fool. That could work. 145 to 146. She says the name Lance Stephenson and really extends the last name. Or Stevenson. Every time I see the PH in like Stephen or Stephenson, I want to say it is a PH. I want to say Steph because that's how it should be pronounced. Stephen would be with a V, but apparently even people who have the name Stephen will say my name is Stephen and they spell it with a PH, and it's this big thing. So it is how it is, whatever. But if I see the PH, I'm going to say it as an F normally. Is this a Southern thing? Yeah. And then one more song. Okay, so the Only by Nicki Minaj. All the song questions, guys. I've already said before, right? Things are weird in music, so most of your questions are going to be explained by that. Not saying don't ask music questions, but don't focus on music as a source of pronunciation. Okay, Nicki Minaj only Nicki Minaj. Oh my God. And I believe you said 50. Yes, 50 seconds. I'm fully just 8, which by the way is broken grammar. But that's okay. I assume it's going to be the first video. 50 seconds. Okay, yeah. My man, full. How'd you say it? Full. Yeah, so the way that she's saying it actually sounds like it's sort of halfway between fool and full, which kind of fits that accent, that sort of like hip hop, African American vernacular type accent. And that's fine. Good question. But obviously, based on the context, it's supposed to be full. Because even with broken grammar, if you say my man fool, like it wouldn't make any sense. Even with broken grammar. And if you say my man a fool, right, you just drop the is like we're doing here, then we'd probably interpret it as fool instead of full. So yeah. Again, those articles, very important. 145, 146, Lance Stephenson, Stevenson, whatever, 140. Let's see. Lance Stevenson. Yeah. Definitely a bit of an accent there. Stevenson. Of course, I'm using that I instead of if I use the schwa, which is also perfectly fine. Stevenson. She's saying like Stevenson, or what is it? Stevenson. How does that? Let me see. Stevenson. She's using a completely different sound. She's like a very nasal E sound. Actually, it's probably supposed to be more of an I. It sounds kind of more like an E. So she's probably using the I pronunciation, Stevenson, but she's making it a little more nasal, a little tighter. It's kind of going up towards E. And it's, I think it's not a Southern thing. It's partially based on the way that she's singing in terms of the sounds she's using. But I think it's mostly just the music and fitting the music. If she were speaking normally, she'd probably say like Lance Stevenson, or something like that. But drawing it out is definitely the music. It's not Southern. One more song and the last one, I promise. Katy Perry, Passenger. What vowel is she doing when she's singing map? Sounds weird. 119 to 128. All that for one word. Okay, Katy Perry, Passenger. Katy Perry, Passenger. Choose the first link. Hopefully this matches. You said 119 to 128. 119. Okay. I think because she repeats it, yeah. Okay, so what she's doing there, I want to be as accurate as I can here. Okay, what she's there might be a little bit of a shift towards a schwa later on, but she's kind of repushing it out. This is something that is fitting the music because she's extending it so long. So instead of saying like without a map, right? One thing that we'll do if we're extending a word like that for a certain amount of time, in order to make it fit the music, because she's not saying like without a map, like a Whitney Houston song or a Disney song or something. She wants it to sort of match that beat. And so she's sort of repushing the sound out. Again, I'm not completely sure if there's a little bit of shift in the tongue, but to me, it mostly sounds like she's doing that lazy ah. Definitely not eh. It's not quite an eh. Lazy ah. And then she just kind of lets the voice fall a little bit and repushes that voice out. So without a map, to match that music again. So that's how I would explain that there. A good question. Again, a music thing. It's a music thing, not a normal speech thing. Do you pronounce calm and palm with an L? No. The standard thing, I've noticed that there are definitely people who do, which is very strange to me. If I remember right from my research, the standard thing across most of American English is the L is no longer pronounced. I don't know if that's changing in some areas, or if I'm just maybe a little more perceptive of things now because I think about pronunciation so much all the time. But I have noticed here and there, some people saying it with an L. And it's fine. If you want to say calm and palm with like it's an L-colored ah, it's acceptable. But I don't see why you would do that when you could just say calm and palm and not even worry about the L. The L is just spelling. Just make it easier on yourself. But yes, it does exist. Can you drop glottal stops sometimes? The word blatantly just gets so annoying, and also definitely sometimes. Can you drop glottal stops? Sometimes, yes, you can drop glottal stops, especially with the T. The T is the most common sound that drops among all possible sounds. Now, can they drop in these words? Because most commonly it's going to drop at the end of a word, as long as it doesn't connect to a vowel or something. It's say if we say first, usually ST at the end, we could drop the T instead of stopping the T. But anyway, blatantly, okay. The first T, if you try to say blatantly, he blatantly did it. Blatantly. Let's see. That was a blatant lie. Blatant lie. It doesn't sound too bad if I try to drop that first T, but I have to force myself to not stop it. It's really uncomfortable to not stop it. So I would definitely say you should probably stop that T. It definitely sounds clearer and better if you stop the T, but it doesn't sound too bad if you drop that first T. The second T, blatantly. That second T you can drop. We have NTL, which is 3 consonants together. Drop the middle one, and L. Blatantly. It's just end L. Blatantly. That's okay. Indefinitely, If you say definitely, this particular word, probably because it's a very common word, yes, you can drop the T. It doesn't matter. If you're speaking a little more slowly and enunciating a bit more, again, we know that there's sort of the normal range, and then there's this more enunciated range. If you're speaking more slowly, if you say definitely, it's going to sound weird. Okay, you either want to keep that stop, definitely, or if you're really enunciating, push out the T, definitely. In that particular word, I think we would almost never push out the T, even when we're enunciating. But in the flow of normal speech, that word, you can drop the T, yes. In the sentence, I wanted what he couldn't give me. Would or can you drop the D in wanted? Yes. I wanted what? I wanted what he couldn't give me. I wanted what? Now, it sounds a little less clear. It sounds a little lazy. In super fast speech, definitely no problem. In normal speech, it can happen. I've noticed that like end Ds before Ws. It's not necessarily just before Ws, but I've noticed particularly like NDs before Ws, or even NTs before Ws, end Ts or end Ds, not N, the letter, like final Ds or final Ts at the end of a word before W. Maybe not always, but I noticed that they do commonly drop, or they can commonly drop. You don't have to. You could say, I wanted what? What? Sort of kind of blend that D and W together, overlap them. Dwa. That would be the more clearly enunciated way to say it. I wanted what? Wanted what? Wanted what? You can also do a little bit of a quick held D and then push out that W. So there's sort of a spectrum between pushing out the D, slightly holding the D and then doing the W, or just dropping the D. That would be the full range of that particular link there. And that's going to be really difficult to do. I've talked to you guys before about like the range of like, say, the placement for sounds like with the TH. So you can go through the teeth, which is the way that they usually teach you for some stupid reason. That's the exaggerated, super clear enunciated version. You can be just behind the teeth. You can actually be a little bit farther back when you're speaking really quickly. Or of course we have that dental TD variation, or the. So that would be like sort of the range of the TH sound. And with the stop sounds, it works a little bit differently. With the vowel sounds, there's sort of like a range around that point in the mouth. And it has to do more with the shape than the actual physical placement. But there's always this idea of a range with sounds in some way. There's also sort of a range of possibility for a lot of the linking. Not all the time. And so a lot of the basic rules that you learn, like say the NT plus vowel, like dropping the T in wanted, because now there's NT plus the I in the ED ending, wanted. Okay. Fully enunciated over here, the nice clear end of the range, wanted, push out the T. Sort of the normal thing that we usually do that would be a little less clearly enunciated would be dropping the T, wanted. Okay. Actually, I guess that goes all the way over here, dropped sound. So here we just have like the two options of the range. Sometimes like going from that D to the W between wanted and what, we see that you can push out the D, you can kind of do a quick hold D, held D, and then push out the W, or you can just completely drop the D. So even in linking, depending on what specific combination we're talking about, either inside of a word or between words, there potentially could be one option, two options, it'll just be the range itself, or there could be, shades in between that. And this is real speech. And often it's kind of whatever comes out, although this end of the range is less likely unless you're speaking more slowly and clearly on purpose. Usually we're going to be in this part over to this part, like the dropping of the sound. So it just depends. It's very dynamic on exactly what we're talking about, which sounds are next to each other and stuff. And that makes it a little complicated. But that's real speech. That's real speech. Anyway, what about it made me realize in fat speech? That's a funny typo. Yeah, only use skinny speech. No. Okay, now this is a different case. Yes, you can drop the D, but you're not actually dropping the D. In really fast speech, you can completely drop it. Okay. In normal speech, it's not actually dropped. This is shifting, okay, which is what I call this specific thing under what is it? Assimilation, according to the technical terms, which I don't use that term because it's confusing and doesn't mean much. So what I call shifting, where say if you have a D, in this case, you have a D sound followed by an M sound. And so instead of doing D to M, you just go into the M and you make it a B without pushing out the B. So it's actually going to be like made me, made me, it made me, made me. And it's just this quick little stop, quick little hold. It made me realize. It made me realize. And that could be hard to catch in the flow of speech, but there's this little tiny hold there on that position with the voice, which will make it technically a stopped or held B. And then you just push out the M. Again, in faster speech, we'll just completely drop it and just go like this, may me. It made me realize. No problem. So again, here we have a range. Made me with the D pushed out, made me with a stop D, made me with a stop B, and then may me in fast speech with just completely dropping the sound. And again, notice fast speech, right? That's what the range does. So the slower and clearer you speak, the more enunciated and correct or proper everything is, the more full, right? We actually push that D out, all the way to increasingly less clear. We have a stop D, stop B. That's not even a D anymore, but it's still stopped, all the way to dropping the sound in fast speech. The faster you go, the more we tend to drop or change things from how they're originally clearly supposed to be pronounced. And that doesn't mean you're going to change every sound in the language. Obviously, that's too extreme, but there's more potential for things to drop or change in faster speech. Can you pronounce paths as paths? Yes, you can. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Again, range, paths, fully enunciated, pass. Just drop the TH. Context is probably going to be important. So if I say there are many paths you can take, obviously I'm not saying pass, P-A-S-S. I'm saying there are many paths you can take. Pass. Now, there's also a little bit of a range here, and what we'll commonly do, you can just completely drop the TH, especially in really fast speech. But what we'll actually commonly do, we'll either push the TH out to make it clear, or more likely, we'll be somewhere in here where what we're going to do is we're going to do an S and we're going to slightly slide, or sorry, not an S. We're going to pass. Instead of going into a full TH and then an S, like paths, we're going to go be kind of close to the TH where it's not actually like a half TH kind of, and then move from there into the S. And so there's like this tiny little TH. So instead of a straight pass with an S, it's like pass. Right. So again, it's almost like you're just that sort of weak pulled back TH that kind of just comes up to that S. That's within the normal range. But again, you could just drop it. It doesn't really matter too much. Okay, some driving vocab usage questions. Do you guys really use shoulder to refer to the side of the road, which can either be soft or hard? Yes. We'll often just say the side of the road, but we do use the word shoulder. Yes. We won't usually say like pull over to the shoulder, but usually if there's like construction, like road work, it'll say like shoulder closed. And that's pretty standard language. So we do use it, but we'll usually just say side of the road in everyday speech. In terms of headlights, what's the most common way to refer to the high beam, high main, full driving beam, and low beam ones? Low dipped, passing, medium beam. I haven't even heard those. Yeah, so high beam, well, high beams, plural. Turn on the high beams. Main beams, never heard that. Full beams, don't think I've ever heard that. Driving beams, definitely never heard that. Low beams. In contrast to high beams, we might use the term low beams, but usually we just say headlights. So there's like, you turn on the headlights and then you turn on the high beams. So dipped beams, no. Passing beams, no. Median beams, no. I've never heard any of those. Would you say parking lights or side lights? I haven't heard either of those. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the ones in the back, the red ones? Because those would be brake lights. Which one is correct? Reverse lights or reversing lights? Again, I have never heard that. I don't know what that is. Fluent American is a YouTuber that also makes accent reduction. Oh, cool. I figured. Yeah, Fluent American. Yeah. Didn't know his accent specifically necessarily, but I kind of figured. I'm definitely going to check out the channel. Who knows? Maybe him and I can do a collab or something. That'd be cool. I use too much. I'd like. Okay, when it comes to ordering food, I'll take is considered more natural. Also, gonna works there too. Yeah, you can use gonna and wanna. So when you're ordering, this is where it gets a little tricky. And this actually brings up a good point. So remember how I said that in American culture, American English, like we do have formality, obviously. But unlike other languages, formality isn't really built into the language as much. Like, many other European languages have two forms of you, one that's formal, one that's informal. Or maybe even more than that if they also have like a plural form that's formal and also informal. So they might have four ways to say you. Or English, we just have you, maybe you guys if it's plural or whatever. So for linguistic reasons and cultural reasons, and I'm going to make a lesson on this at some point, probably when I get to more of the grammar stuff. I think it's better to think of American English specifically, not in terms of like formal and informal, but in terms of standard politeness and informal. Because there are some things, even some words, that sound very fancy and formal, like we wouldn't necessarily use them in everyday speech. But in terms of interactions with people, with some exceptions, whether grammatically or in terms of vocabulary, I don't think there are a whole lot of things that actually sound really formal, like as its own category, as opposed to informal. Most things will just sound more polite, and other things will sound less polite, which would make it sound a bit more informal. It would drop it into the informal category, where the polite one isn't formal, it's just sort of standard. And I really like using the example of Japanese for this, because Japanese, actually in Japanese grammar, they have an informal form where if you're like really familiar with somebody and they're not older than you, or they give you permission, because usually just 1 year difference, you have to use formal language speaking to that person who's 1 year older than you. But they have this really informal form of the language. They have the standard politeness of the language. And then they have like forms of verbs that are humble and honorific, where you would refer to yourself humbly and you would refer to the person you're talking to in the honorific or version. And so it's a very stratified society. And so they have all the way from this super informal version to this standard politeness that you just use interacting with, people normally that you're, either you don't know or that you're not, super close with. And then they have this other step, which actually like stratifies you from that person directly through the language with how you're speaking. And that's like super, super formal, super, super respectful, right? So if we sort of use that sort of structure, like conceptual structure, English doesn't really have much of this top level. It has the standard and it has the informal. Or you could say the standard politeness and the less polite, not impolite necessarily, because going all the way to impolite would actually it'd still be in informal. It's like informal has two categories. There's like normal informal and then really impolite informal. So like if you use the F word, he's like F you, whatever, that's going to be impolite. Obviously informal, but very impolite, very rude, right? So I think American English works a little bit more like that. So with that as the background to this answer, when you are ordering food, or when you're buying stuff at a store, like you go to a convenience store or whatever, and you're asking for items, okay, most commonly at a restaurant, if you say "I'd like," that's not formal, that's just standard politeness, okay. Then if you say, now, when you're asking for stuff, whether that's in a restaurant or not, the exact verb that you use can have a very big impact for how polite or impolite it sounds. So that's why the standard phrase that you learn is "I'd like," "I would like," because the would makes it, obviously it's not hypothetical, but as I talked about in the last live stream, would is sort of like the hypothetical form of will in a way. It's like more abstract, it's less direct. And so we tend to use it to make things sound more polite, right? So you're not saying "I want," that sounds very direct, less, it doesn't sound polite at all. You're just basically saying give me this, right? "I want this." Or if you say "I would like," it sort of implies like, oh, if you would be so kind to bring me this food that I want to eat, I would appreciate it. That's all implied when you say "I would like." Okay. So that's standard politeness. If you say "I'll have," that particular verb with will, that sounds perfectly fine. Okay. I wouldn't say it doesn't sound impolite. Okay. It's maybe just below that standard, right? So it's sort of more, a little bit in that informal range, but not all the way down into impolite. Okay. It just doesn't quite sound as nice and as polite. You say "I'll have the, salad." Okay. If you say I'll take the salad. Again, take sounds a little bit more direct, right? Take, but it's okay. Sounds a bit more informal, not quite as polite, but it's not impolite. Okay, so that's perfectly fine also. Very common, very normal. Yes. I wouldn't say it's more natural. Like "I'd like" is still perfectly natural and common. It's just there's many other things that we can use, right? With "gonna," so if you say like, "I'm gonna have the salad." Okay, if you're talking to your friend who's also eating with you, that would be a normal thing to say. If you're talking to the waiter or waitress, and they say, what would you like? You say, "I'm gonna have the salad." Gonna here in this context, it does sound even just a little bit lower than "I'll have" or "I'll take," but it still doesn't quite sound impolite. It's kind of getting down to where it's like a little bit, but it's still perfectly normal. Okay, perfectly normal. Your tone can be a bit important there. If you say like "I'm gonna have the salad," and you say it like that to the waitress, it sounds like you're very annoyed and like, hey, like, just give me a salad, right? So tone can play an important role here as well. But if you say "I want," right? "Oh, what would you like?" I want the salad." That is really starting to get a bit more into that impolite range a bit. Because our culture is quite informal already, it's still kind of acceptable, but you're kind of pushing the boundary there down to where it's starting to sound impolite. So English has lots of these shades from sort of standard politeness to not so nice, but still okay, informal, all the way down to like that sounds rude, right? Where it's not polite anymore. I would like a hamburger. I'd like a hamburger. I'll have a hamburger. I'll take a hamburger. I'm going to have a hamburger. I'm going to take a hamburger. Yeah, all of those are fine. Again, going from that scale of standard politeness down to a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, but not quite down to impolite. Yeah. Okay, Gabriel. Are philosophy books hard for you to understand? I bought a book in English about Stoicism because in Portuguese it was overly complicated. I'm scared now. So, interesting question. Depending on exactly what it is and depending on how it's written, obviously, like, you can write a book in very fancy language that even like the average native speaker might have difficulty understanding, or you can write something that is, complicated in a way that's easy to understand for the average person. So how it's written is an important thing. But when we're talking about philosophy, it is very common that the writer, especially if it's their philosophy and they're writing some sort of paper or something, and like, this is my understanding of the world and my theories and stuff, they tend to use language that is much more abstract. It's much more higher level. Might be the sentences might be sort of longer and more convoluted, or sort of like they're made in an exaggerated way to make it sound more important or more intelligent. And even for natives, that can make it more difficult. For me personally, I have looked at some writings of some philosophers that I was just like, this is difficult to follow. Especially if translated. Like if you try to read Kierkegaard translated into English, it's very difficult. Very, very difficult. So yeah, it depends. But philosophy is generally harder to read, to understand. Yes. Stoicism, I don't think Stoicism doesn't have to be explained in a complicated way. So that one, I think it may just be the person who wrote the book tried to write it in a really fancy way, and that's what makes it difficult. But Stoicism itself is it shouldn't be that complicated. Sorry if it's an intrusive question, but how much do you pay the waiter in tips? By the way, if you say how much you pay the waiter in tips as a question, not as a statement, that sounds like broken grammar. It sounds a bit more like the African American vernacular. So again, exposure to certain kinds of music and stuff. Again, not saying that it's bad, but you might develop some bad habits that don't fit the standard and sound like broken, more informal English. So according to the standard, or against the standard, just to be aware of that. But okay, so how much do you pay later in tips? Just asking because there's no tips here. Would they get offended if I give just $1 in tips? So here in the States, we do have sort of a standard, which I think it's supposed to be, what do we do? I think it's like 8% of the total bill or something like that. So it depends on your total bill. So if your bill was like $10, then what's 8% of $10? I can't do math. 10% would be $1. So what, 80 cents? And you'll probably tip them a little more than that, right? If your bill was that low, you give them a couple dollars or something. But if you had, say, like a $50 bill, because it was a big meal, lots of people or something like that, you take 8% of that. That's sort of the standard, more or less. Some people like to go higher. Some people like to go lower. We'll also base it on the service. So if it's like a really good waiter or waitress, we're more likely to tip more. We might go to like 15, 20% tip. If we think that they gave us bad service or they were kind of rude or something like that, then we'll either drop the tip percentage, or if it's really bad, not give any tip. And that's sort of the customer's way of saying indirectly, without actually saying, hey, you did a horrible job. It's the customer's way of saying you did a horrible job because there's no tip for you. Now, some people just, maybe they're really cheap, or they're, kind of poor, right? They're maybe don't have a whole lot of money. And so those people might either tip less or not at all. That is considered a bit rude. As long as the waiter did a good job, if you don't tip them, it is considered rude. Like you should tip the waiter or waitress. So yeah, that would be part of our restaurant culture. Yeah. So in words like importantly and currently, you can drop the glottal stop because it's NTL. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, importantly. Now the word important, because we have that T and then that N again after it, we we're a little more likely to keep the stop there, importantly, but you could still drop that second T. Importantly is okay. With currently, I'm currently working on it. That's perfectly fine. Again, if you slow down a little bit more, you enunciate a little bit more, and you drop the T, it's not going to sound as good. Okay. So it's your speed matters. How clearly you're enunciating matters, but it is possible. Interesting. I always did a glottal stop and would only drop if I was speaking fast. That's a good rule to follow. I would say if you're not speaking fast, just do the glottal stop. Just fact checking is hors d'oeuvre. Yes, it is, as I just said, by the average American. And do you add a Z sound? Yeah, hors d'oeuvres. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Or you could say it the way my grandma says it, which is hors d'oeuvres, which I think is probably closer to the French. I don't really know how it's supposed to be pronounced in French, but she says hors d'oeuvres. Yeah, we say hors d'oeuvre. Because from an English perspective, especially, I was gonna say American perspective, probably even more so for us than British people, because they're more cultured than we are. But from an English perspective, like, how would you even try to say that? It's like horse d'oeuvre. Like, that's how we would try to say it if we were trying to pronounce it in an English way. So we just say hors d'oeuvre, which is probably a little closer to the French. But we're not going to try to say it in a French way. It's a bit too much for us. Maybe it's like hors d'oeuvre or something like that. Hors d'oeuvre. Is concession stand a common word? Like, hold up, let me get something from the concession stand. In the right context, yeah. I mean, if you're at a sporting event or whatever and there's a concession stand, perfectly fine. No problem. I wouldn't say it's a common word in the context of everyday life. You have to be in the right situation. Yeah. And we caught up, guys. It's been an hour and 22 minutes. We have about an hour or so left, so we can keep going. Good. I think I got everything. Yeah. All right. We're all questioned out for today. So I will say, I mentioned last time that I'm kind of trying to build English Hacks out into like a bigger thing. I'm going to rebrand my books and all this stuff. A little minor update on that. I am currently, I went through my master document for like all the pronunciation lessons that I want to make, whether they're part of the main course or not. And it's gotten kind of messy. So I went and made a spreadsheet. I divided it up into like sounds, rhythm, stress, intonation, pacing, flow, thought chunks, et cetera. And then I bolded the most important lessons that are likely going to be in the actual main course. And then I opened up a new document and I started actually saying, okay, let's do this one first. Here's the notes for it. Let's do this one second. Here's the notes for it. So I'm sort of building out this like more detailed, organized master list for the main pronunciation course. And it's coming together quite nicely. I've already recorded one of the videos. So the next lesson that I post will be the dental T or D main lesson, because I've had some confusion and questions about that. So this will be the one-stop shop. And there's going to be lots of examples for both the dental T and dental D, including linking or flow examples like between words, combos like TH to TH or TH to T, D to TH, and how that affects it. It's sort of a special group. And then if there's an M or N going to TH, how you can just use that dental N instead of the dental T or D. So that's all going to be in that next coming lesson. And then the second one I'm going to do after that is the lazy main lesson. So I'm going to make a lesson for that as well. Then and this is subject to change, but right now after that, I have sound clusters. I'm going to try to do an all-in-one lesson covering, all the various sound clusters. And there's some important information about that, like, because a lot of resources you find, they seem to mix the concept of letters and sounds Like they refer to SH as a sound cluster when it's not a sound cluster. It's a written cluster, but it's just one sound. It's sh, right? It's just represented by two letters. So I have a little preface there to make sure that's clear. And then we're going to go through all the different clusters and stuff. Right now for the fourth spot, I'm going to be, which this one, I kind of want to avoid this one just because it's such a big lesson. It's going to be a pain, but it's called All American English Vowel Sounds Masterclass, because I had some requests for that before. So I'm going to try to make just one big master lesson for all the vowel sounds. And there's some extra information, things that maybe I wasn't aware of when I made the main lesson for E and I and eh, that I'm going to try to include in here. So you're going to get lots of extra tips and tricks and things in that. After that, feeling tongue exercises and using native language to build feeling. So this deals with like learning how to feel your tongue and using anchor points and micro adjustments. Number 6, primary stress versus secondary stress and that whole concept. Number 7, reductions with to. So gonna, wanna, tryna, fina, or I guess finna, which is not standard. Ima, imana, goda, winta becomes winda or winna. And then other specific ones. This was from a question that somebody left a while ago. Like he's working to be a doctor. He's working to be. So just a bunch of reductions with to. 8, contractions masterclass, which will cover the pronunciation, formation, and usage of contractions. And this will be primarily like the it's not going to include a lot of the extra spoken contractions like kinda, lemmy, gimme, gotta, wanna, have to, whatever. It's going to focus on the ones that have the apostrophes, which are written and spoken. Again, they're not informal. They're just a normal part of the language. But we have the present tense, past tense, future tense, present perfect, past perfect, would, could, should, must, double contractions like I'd have or wouldn't have. And then the special case of contractions that actually sound more formal, like needn't or mustn't. Number 9, smoothing out rhythm / eating vowels. So that's going to introduce a lot more with like the rhythm and rhythm reductions, things that's going to be a big one coming. And then I have some notes here for some of the range flow lessons that are going to come later after the main course. So that's what I have right now so far. There's still more that I need to plot out. But that's sort of what I'm laying out right now for you guys. And as I said, I've already recorded the first one. I'm going to start editing that. And yeah, I'm also, I can't make any guarantees on this because I know how life is and I know how my brain works. But what I'm going to try to do, there's approximately like say 20 to 30 more lessons in the main course, not including the extra practice, which I'm still making more extra practice lessons. And what I want to try to do is maybe try to post one video every other day, which is going to be really, really difficult. But I'm going to try to do that, and I might wait a couple weeks to start that. I'm plan on posting a new video within the next few days, so that's the next one coming. But that way I can kind of get the pronunciation course out of the way and really like push myself and be like, okay, we got stuff done. So no promises, but that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Okay, just fact checking is, oh wait, where did that one? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, is it possible? So Andre, welcome Andre. Is it possible to eliminate 100% of the foreign accent and sound like first English speaker accent? So sound like a native speaker, we would say, a native speaker. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible for every person? Probably not. Is it possible for the average person? I would say yes. I believe very strongly that for the average person who's not particularly talented or gifted, it's still possible. But it's a lot of work. If you have some natural talent for it, it's still a lot of work, but it won't take as long, relatively. It's still going to take a little while, and it's not going to be quite as difficult. If you don't have any special talent, you're just kind of average with language or with the pronunciation of language, then it's going to take you a little bit longer. Might be a little bit more difficult for certain sounds, like maybe the R. But I do very strongly believe that it is 100% possible for the average person. In my experience teaching people, a lot of people will get up to, say, maybe 95 to 98%, where like you can't tell where they're from anymore, but they don't sound completely native, not completely natural. It's just like really, really good. It's just like there's something kind of off. They'll get up to around that level. And remember, there's something called the Law of Diminishing Returns. This is for anything you learn. It works for grammar and for pronunciation. When you first start something, everything is new. And so you're just learning. You learn a bunch at the beginning, right? And as you progress more and more, you get farther and farther, you know more and more. So you know a lot of the big things, and the things that are left are smaller and smaller and smaller, and they give you less and less benefit. So to get all the way up to 100%, as you get farther, you're getting less and less benefit. It takes a little bit longer to get a little bit more. And so a lot of people, although they would like to reach 100%, they reach about 95 to 98%, and they say, I'm happy, right? That doesn't mean it's not possible to reach 100%, but they have put in a bunch of work and they're happy with where they are. And so they stop. So that's really the main problem is it possible, but can you get there? Do you want it bad enough to get there? Especially if you're bad at languages, which I don't generally like to use that, but we all have strengths and weaknesses, right? So I wouldn't put it as bad at language, but if you're, there's talented, average, and then say below average for a particular skill. If you're below average for languages, which most people would probably think that they're below average when most people are not, they're average. Obviously, it's called average for a reason, just based on the horrible way that languages are taught. People think that they can't learn a language when that's the most ridiculous nonsense that I've ever heard. But that aside, so don't just put yourself into this below average category, because you're probably not. You're probably average. That's why it's called average, or maybe talented. But if you are below average, if you're one of those people that are actually not in the average, it either might not be possible, or you're probably going to have to spend your entire life. Now, there's also another thing here, which is the longer you've been trying to speak English with the incorrect pronunciation, right, with an accent, the harder it is to get rid of it, because you get fossilization and you have to sort of rewire the way that you do things. And that takes a lot of extra conscious effort, which is why it's best to start from the beginning. And most classes don't do this. They do not value pronunciation, which is one of the biggest travesties. It's a fun word for you. One of the biggest unfortunate things in language learning, and one of the biggest things that could be fixed in how languages are taught. You start with pronunciation. And if you start there, you have a really good chance of mastering the accent, especially if you use a lot of the tools and techniques that are required to like master your mouth, master your ears, do ear training, all this stuff. You have a very good chance. But if you've been speaking English for 5 years with an accent, and you have fossils, and you haven't been training your ears, you haven't been training your mouth, not that it's impossible, but it's going to make it harder, because you have to undo some damage that you had. So it depends on your exact case. But I do think most people can make it if they really want to. Yes. What is the cause of mergers? Could the scientists to predict a certain merger, or to say this merger is possible, and that merger is hardly probable? For example, is it possible in 100 years to get a well, yeah, so go is O, right? So I guess you're saying, instead of go, gone, it would be ga, gone. So go changes to ga. I vote for E, merger. I don't know. That's a very, very much a linguistics question. I'm not a linguist. I'm not a language scientist, so it's a bit above my head. What's the cause? If I were to guess based off of what I know and what I would, think is true. Number one, language naturally changes over time, but some sounds are maybe close enough together, like ah and aw. Like you would think, obviously they're quite different. For people who don't have the merger, they're like night and day, right? They're separate. But one is here, one is here. One uses the lips, one doesn't. And so if you say, okay, well, it could be natural that maybe, it starts regionally, like particular region. Maybe some people, for whatever reason, they get kind of lazy with their speech, or whatever. And this kind of gets a little bit more relaxed back here. This, the lips kind of relax and starts dropping down here, and they end up meeting because this is sort of the neutral point between the two, right? And so they sort of float into each other. This relaxes down, this relaxes back, and then you get one sound where there was two. Probably something like that. I don't know. Language changes over time. I know I mentioned this last time, between Old English, which is a very old language that nobody speaks anymore, and Middle English, which also nobody speaks anymore. Between Old English and Middle English, there was a major vowel shift that was consistent. And I think like mouse used to be pronounced like moose or something like that. So like mouse, moose. House was hoose. I don't remember the exact change, but it was something like that. And it changed from like hoose to house. And there was a bunch of vowels that shifted between Old English and Middle English. And that, of course, took some time. It didn't just happen overnight. And some of the grammar started to change as well. And that's why it's called Old English and Middle English, because it's still English. They're still related, but now it's almost like they're like two separate languages, because it changed so much, right? And then we're speaking modern English. So is it possible for go, gone to become ga, gone? That particular one, I don't think so. Maybe, who knows? E and E, that one is a likely candidate. Maybe at some point it'll merge. I don't know. I don't think so, because, well, I mean, again, I was going to say, to us, it's night and day, but they're very close to each other. I mean, who knows? Maybe either E and I, or maybe I and E, because there's like the pin-pen merger. So if you have, what is it? The E before N in some regions, some speakers, they just say it as pin with the second vowel. Can you give me, can you pass me that pin so I can write? So yeah, it happens. I don't know why. I've heard people turn voiceless THs into voiced THs, then adding a Z to pluralize it instead of, okay, is that regional? Can you always pluralize it by just adding an S sound after it? Good question. It's not regional in my experience. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm part of the region, but I don't think it's regional. That is possible. It's a variation. You could say, so, okay, one bath, voiceless TH, right? This house has two baths. Perfectly fine. This house has two baths. There's two baths and one bedroom, whatever. Possible. Yes, possible. How many baths do you have? How many baths do you have? They both sound fine, to me at least. Again, maybe I'm part of the regional thing, and so that's why they both sound fine. But I would say it's just a standard variation. Question mark. Yeah. Anyway, now if you try to say bath as bath, draw bath, that sounds a bit weird to me. Usually for these words, because the voiced th is most commonly used at the start of a word, followed by the middle of a word, and then it's least commonly used at the end of a word. And it's, I think at the end of a word, it's most commonly used for, like, we have like bath and bathe, where the vowel will usually change. We'll have a silent e at the end, and it becomes a voiceless th, or sorry, a voiced th. So yeah, it sounds like if you try to say like bath singular, it seems more reminiscent of bathe, and you're just like not changing the vowel for some reason. Anyway, for hectare, would you say hectare, or would you pronounce it like the name Hector? Neither. And I can't wait for the lazy eye lesson. So much great stuff to look forward to. Exactly. Yeah. Hectare. It's air. Hectare. A hectare. I've never heard somebody say hectare. A hectare of land. So reducing the air to that is possible. Like 1 hectare of land, that's okay. But more often than not, I hear it pronounced as hectare with an air. Deleted message, signal or signal. Neither of those. Are you a Portuguese speaker, Theris? I asked because you're completely ignoring that L and making it into more of an O sound, which is a very Portuguese thing to do. Okay, so your first transcription would be sino, which is obviously not that word. That's not even a word. Your second transcription, although that's not quite how I would transcribe it, is closer. That would be signo. Yeah, Portuguese speaker, that's what I thought. So in Portuguese, right, when you see that AL at the end, you want to say something like signal, no. And that doesn't quite exist in English. The closest thing to it would be the L-colored O. But at the end of the word signal, that A is not an O. It's not an A. If you look in the dictionary, it's probably going to be a schwa. But as I've said before, the way that I speak and the way that still sounds perfectly neutral and natural, instead of trying to do an L-colored schwa, just completely ignore that and just do the half L, the dark L, right? Half L vowel sound. So you're going from N to O, signal. So there's no O. If you start rounding your lips, you're not doing it right. Okay, there's no lip rounding at all. But the first part of that sig, I would agree with that, yes. And then the N going to O, signal, not signal. Okay, she was curious but did not dare go close. No to before go. She was curious but did not dare to go close. Not dare to go close. Okay, I think, I'm not 100% sure on this. I think adding the to is grammatically incorrect, but with or without the to, it sounds perfectly normal and natural. It might just be that the to isn't required. It has to do with dare. And yeah, that's right, because it's actually, well, say if I use it as a command, if I say like don't you dare do that, right? We don't usually use to with the command. But here it's not really a command. She was curious but did not dare go close. You can add the to. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Right. Do you use a voiceless th in with? Yes. Well, with is a special word where it doesn't matter. You can use voiced or voiceless. It makes no difference at all. I think what it's supposed to be, the way that we think of it, is a voiceless th. But in my observations, I've noticed that it can come out either way. And commonly, if the next sound is voiced, that'll make it into a voiced TH, but it doesn't have to. There's no rule that says you have to do that. And if there is a rule, it's wrong. So you can say with or with. Who are you with? Who are you with? No problem. We're probably going to use the voiceless one if there's nothing after it, but you can use the voice. It doesn't matter. Without, voiced or unvoiced. Without. 100% both are perfectly fine. Okay. Here again, all vowels are voiced. We're going into ow. So it's a little more likely that we're going to do the voiced one, just because we get to keep that voice going the whole time from the I to the to the ow, without. But you can say without. There's no problem with that. I must have heard you say them about 1,000 times, but the dental TH, okay, the dental version makes the distinction less clear. Okay. If we include the dental version, so remember the dental one is dental T and D, definitely super common at the start of a word. It can happen anywhere in a word, but it's less common at the end of a word, unless there's something after. If there's nothing after it, like if I say, who are you with? It could happen, I guess, if you're being really lazy, but we're probably just gonna do right? Who are you with? But as soon as you add anything after it, it doesn't matter what the sound after it is. Like saying without, I could say without as a, that would be a dental T if I had voice to it, without. Dental T, dental D, it doesn't matter. They both sound perfectly fine. So the word without has 4 ways to say it. Voiceless TH, voiced TH, dental T, dental D, all 100% perfectly fine. Anyway, good question. Yeah. If I'm talking about riding a horse with a saddle, can I just use the word bareback, or should I say bareback horse riding so it sounds less weird? Okay. I mean, yeah, as long as the context is clear, you don't have to say horse riding after it. But like, say, for example, a sentence like I always ride bareback, like I never use a saddle. It's perfectly fine. Yeah. Or you say, oh, let's go bareback. Let's not use the saddle. Whatever. What about notwithstanding? Okay. So focusing on the TH, because obviously like with the T, you can maybe stop it, push it out, whatever. Notwithstanding, voiceless. If I say notwithstanding, that one we probably wouldn't say because the S is voiceless. And it's a little trickier to switch that voice off and go into the S. It's a lot easier just to keep it voiceless. So that's probably just going to be a voiceless one because of the S after it, right? Can we use the dental? Okay, withstanding. Notwithstanding. Possible. It's actually a little harder to say, especially with the not before it. So maybe the dental one is a little less likely in that particular combination, but still fine. Yeah. I think probably for this particular word, the most common thing to do would just be to do a voiceless TH for just various reasons, notwithstanding. Or actually, you can actually drop the TH because remember with you can, that particular word, the TH actually isn't always required because it's just a little function word and it's very common. So you can actually say notwithstanding, withstanding. So that's another option. You can't do that with without, right? You say without. I'll do it without you. Wow, it's a little too much. You need the TH there in some form. So, okay. Is turning S and Z into sh and j before Y considered lazy or careless? Okay. So, like, for example, pass your cup. I'm not typing. Pass your cup. Okay. So instead of doing pass your, it'd be like pasture. Okay. Or if it were voice, like please plus, I don't know, you, please you. Okay. I have, because when I was talking about what was that? Oh yeah, the lesson I made on like all the remaining, or most of the remaining linking rules, and I was talking about like shifting and all this other stuff. I looked some stuff up because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. And I'm pretty sure I got everything. But one thing that I saw was this whole thing of like changing the s to sh, or the z to j before y. And I was really, really surprised by that. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Since then, I have played with it a bit. I've listened a bit, and I noticed that speakers do that. But my stance is still exactly what you're saying here. It's lazy. It's lazy, which is fine. It's perfectly, it's going, again, at this range. It's within the normal range. I would say super clearly enunciated, right? Pass your. It's very clearly an S. Within the normal range, still an S. But the faster and lazier you get, the more likely it's going to start changing into that SH. Like pass your cup. Instead of pass your cup. Now you could still keep it as an ace, as an S, You can still keep it as an S there, by just sort of enunciating that one particular sound. That's okay, but the faster and more lazily we speak, the more likely it is just to come out as an SH, or if it were voiced, the ZH. So that would be my stance on it. Yes, I don't think it's not like a rule that like this is how it's supposed to be pronounced if you're speaking clearly. No, like I would never say pass. See, I went straight to the S as soon as I tried to enunciate. I would never say pass your cup. That's wrong. 100% wrong. Okay. So good question. Yeah. Portuguese speaker. Thank you. You're welcome. Anuwat. Welcome to the chat. I probably said your name very horribly. I'm sorry. Hi. I have a hard time to pronounce SH after TH. Sounds such as with shampoo. Wait. Oh, okay. With, yeah. I putting quotations around the exact things really helps. Because I was saying such as with, and then example word, but you're saying such as with shampoo. So there'd be quotation with shampoo. Important. But anyway, okay, so with shampoo, with shrimp, can I omit the TH sound? Okay, if you're saying the word with, 100%, it doesn't matter. You can say with shampoo, with shrimp. We do that all the time. If you're more clearly enunciating with shampoo, with shrimp, then yes, we're going to push out that TH sound. But in the flow of normal speech, for the word with, you can very commonly just drop that TH sound. Okay. And it doesn't really matter what's after it necessarily. If it's a vowel, it's probably going to link with a TH sound, but if it's a consonant, we commonly drop it. So, but that's using the word with. What if you say the path shows the way, whatever. So we have path and shows. So now it's not with the word with, right? Could you say the path shows the way? The path shows. Speaking really quickly, that's fine. But if I'm just sort of speaking more normally, not super quickly, the path shows the way. The path shows the way. We're probably going to do a very lazy light TH. You can watch the lesson about the full range of the TH sound to learn more about that. But it's where instead of getting nice and close with the th, like path shows, you can sort of be a little farther back, not too far where it's just breath. I'd be like path shows. It's not right. Just close enough to where it still sounds a little bit like a TH. instead of okay. The path shows. And then of course you don't want to breathe it out too heavily. That wouldn't be right either. But yeah, I mean, you can more or less drop it in that case too. So I would say generally the TH before the SH, yes, you can probably drop it, especially in fast speech, or at least do the lazy one. David, how do you feel about saying not yet as not yet? Common, super informal. Is it better to hold the final T in not and then add the yet? And Sylvia retracted a message. Okay. Well, how I feel that I feel Lion King. That's how I feel. Because there's the original cartoon movie, right? In the middle of I Can't Wait to Be King. There's a point where Zazu, the bird, he says, "Not yet." I'm pretty sure he uses the CH in there, unless my memory is wrong. But of course, he has a British accent. But not yet. So we know that the T and the Y can blend into ch. That's a very standard thing. These two particular words, like, is it ready? Not yet. That's fine. I do think these two in particular, we will more commonly stop the T and say not yet, or even drop the T and say not yet. That's just the easiest thing to do. It might have something to do with the fact that it's the negative there. I mean, we say don't you, but that's with you because it's the negative plus yet. It's like a little bit of a lower frequency than with the word you. That's where it most commonly happens with the word you. But it can also happen with year, like that year. That year I was, very light CH that year. Anyway, that's kind of a weird one. I know I've seen it with year, but anyway, there's another point. Possible, but I don't think it's the most likely thing we would do. I must rewatch Lion King, yes. And Sylvia has retracted messages. No need to retract messages. Always your choice, but there are no stupid questions. Not a problem. What is that? Oh, probably. Things. Is this the 50 or the 30? So, yeah, variation. The T and the Y can be weird sometimes. What I will say between the T and the Y, regardless, it's always possible to stop the T and then say the Y. It's like say when we say like don't you or something, and you can say don't you or don't you, and it's sort of 50-50. If you blend it into CH or you stop the T, both of them are super common. It's just whatever comes out. But in like other combinations with like T, it ends in a T and it starts in a Y with other words and stuff, the stop will always work. That's sort of like the safe thing, where blending to the CH, sometimes it might sound kind of weird. So to be safe, I would just stop the T. But if you listen closely and you hear natives blending them in a particular combination, then as long as their accent doesn't sound, generally regional, it sounds, pretty standard, then if you want to say it that way, say it that way. No problem. Hi there. Can you give me an advance advice? How to pronounce OO as in would or look. Okay. So the first thing I will say here, never trust the spelling. Okay. Never. One second. No, it was 20. Okay. Never trust the spelling. Okay. Because OO can represent different sounds. Like if it's MOO, moo, that's the sound that a cow makes. That's oo. Spelled OO, but it's oo. In the words would and look, this is the same as in book, took, right? Most commonly, OO is right? But there are words where it's oo or whatever. I call this the high schwa, not actually a schwa sound. There's a reason I call it the high schwa. It's a nice little nickname I gave it because of how it feels in my mouth. And I have a full lesson on that sound If you haven't watched it, just type in English Hacks Hai Schwa and it'll pop up. And have you seen that lesson? Because if you haven't, I'm going to point you there. If you have seen it and you're still having trouble, which is likely, very possible, then I can maybe try to explain it more, or you can maybe try to explain a little bit of the difficulty you're having. Like when you say it, does it sound more like ooh or oh or something else? And then I can maybe give you some tips. So first, have you seen that lesson or no? Let me know. I don't pay much attention to British accent because it was getting in the way, not on the way, getting in the way in my learning process. You can use in there, probably say in the way of something. In is okay. Do you know if they say to is to? Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure of exactly like all the words that do this, but I do know that like stu, where Americans say stew, they say stew. So they'll change that into a ch. If they say like the number two, like there are two people, there are two people. Maybe in some British dialects, but I don't think that's standard proper British. That sounds weird to me. There are two people, two people. Maybe a little bit of, I don't know. I don't speak British English. I'm not an expert on British English, so maybe, but I don't think so. STU definitely, or STU. Two. Yeah. I don't know. No, I don't. Okay, so no, I haven't. Right? Have you watched? No, I haven't. Which is no problem, right? I'm just giving you a correction. It's perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm going to recommend that you go watch that video first. I'll go ahead and link it. I will go ahead and talk a bit about it here. But definitely watch that lesson because that explains everything. Where? Okay, content. Hai Schwa. Okay. And after that, there's also an extra practice lesson that gives you a lot of example words, and you can see my mouth. It should be the next lesson after this lesson, so it should just play right after it. But you can share the link, come over here, bam. Okay, so that's the lesson for the Hai Schwa. And again, it's not a schwa sound. Don't confuse it. It's just my name, and I explain why I call it that in the lesson. But as I say in the lesson, so there's the schwa sound right? Sort of like it uses the middle of the tongue. The back of the tongue, right? On the bottom you have ah, so ah. Then you have, well, it's not like this. My hand isn't the best, but ah, down and back. Above that you have the start of o. Up a little farther you have oo. Okay, so these are the sounds that are around it. Ah, o, oo. And then a little bit farther forward than oo, and a little bit farther down than oo, sort of like this way from the oo position. You don't want to bring the lips all the way around. They will come out naturally, like, You don't have to do that, but it's a common thing. Just make sure your lips aren't rounded like that because it's going to sound more like an oo sound. Okay, that's one big important thing. Don't round your lips. But aside from that, the tongue, the reason I call it the Hai Schwa is because the schwa is sort of here in the middle, right? And it feels in my mouth. Now you're not moving anything. Don't get confused, but it's as if instead of putting the sound here in the middle of the tongue, you're using the back of your tongue, pushing it up and forward a little bit. And so it's kind of like if you were to do the schwa, but from here instead of from here, you'll get instead of uh. Okay. And so there's like the back of your tongue, the middle of your tongue, the front of your tongue. And we want to sort of try to put it on the line between the back and the middle, and then sort of try to push that up and forward just a little bit with your tongue muscle. Uh, uh, uh. Okay. That's the basic description. Go watch the lesson. And if you have more questions about that later, come back. We can explore it more. It's a very difficult sound to get. When I work with students, most students will work at least 2 or 3 lessons just trying to get that sound, like just trying to find the sound, not master the sound, but to find the sound. And often I have to try to explain it like several different ways. So yeah, it takes time. You just got to play with it and find it. I would recommend recording yourself. You might, I don't know how well you can hear that sound compared to other sounds. You might need a little bit of ear training, which I also have lessons for that. But if you record yourself, and especially with the extra practice lesson where like you see me and hear me say book, and then if you record yourself saying book, and you just like record yourself repeating after all the words in the extra practice lesson, and then you go back and you listen. So you'll hear me and you'll hear you, you'll hear me and you'll hear you, and you should sort of notice, okay, does it sound close? Does it sound not quite the same? And then you can go and try to make little changes and say, okay, well, if I do this, does it sound better? Right. So recording yourself to hear yourself better is a really good tool. Alrighty. We have about 20 minutes. I can go at any time now. So if there's no more questions, we can end here, but I do have about 20 minutes available left. So if there's any other questions or comments or whatever, now is the time. I haven't seen Daniela today. The heck is that? I don't know who that is. Yay. Okay. I can pronounce book, but when I try would, for instance, I could make it what? Okay, so can and could are both positive. So I think one of those is supposed to be negative. So you're saying, so you can pronounce book, but when you try to say would, you can't make it? I assume that's what you're saying. Or maybe can't pronounce book and then would, it would be positive. But either way, one thing to keep in mind, well, also one thing I want to lay out, just so these two are pronounced exactly the same, right? The first one is spelled O-U-L. There's no L, there's no U, it's just It's exactly the same sound. It's just spelling. So don't confuse that. Same thing in could and should. But one thing to keep in mind, and this is true for all sounds, especially all vowel sounds, you might notice that like maybe after you find the sound, say like you can produce the sound pretty well. Okay, could not, sorry. Okay, yeah, no problem. Like you can start to say okay, that's fine, and then maybe you say book, and oh, that sounds pretty good, right? Okay, people say that that's good. Okay, no problem. But then you say would, and it comes out as like wood or would or something like that, right? It doesn't quite sound right. What's happening there, if you actually have the sound, you want to make sure you get the sound first. Okay, as long as you have the sound, but then maybe some words or even a lot of words, you're having difficulty producing that exact same sound. It's very common that either going from a particular sound or to a particular sound, meaning the sound before the vowel or the sound after the vowel, it's very common that one or both of those can make it difficult for you to say the vowel. So maybe in the case of book with the B and the K, you don't have any problem and you can say between those two sounds just fine. But then when you try to put a W in front of it, maybe you don't have complete control of your lips and it ends up it sounds more like ooh, like wooed, right? Because you need to release those lips more, but you have to use your lips for the W and it just confuses your brain and the sound doesn't come out right. Or maybe because you're using your lips, you lose control of your tongue. It sort of gets out of the right position. And then when you release the lips, you're not in that position anymore. That happens. Okay, this is a common thing. That's why you have to find the sound first, get it consistent, and then start putting it into different sound combinations, different words, find the ones that are difficult for you, and then put extra practice into those particular combinations so that you can say that sound in any situation, or, surrounded by any other sounds. And it sucks, but that's just a part of the process. It's a very normal, natural part of the process. Because at the end of the day, when we're speaking language, right, spoken language, all you're really doing is you're making one sound and another sound and another sound and another sound and another sound, and you're putting them together, right? That's all you're doing. It's just a big stream of different sounds. Some use the lips, some use the tongue, some are vowels, some are consonants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But all you're really doing is putting a bunch of sounds together. So sometimes going from this sound to that sound, or that sound to this sound, causes difficulty, and you just have to practice that. Josh be acting like he's low-key taking attendance. I guess so, right? Yeah. So yeah, this person isn't here. You are absent. You get low grade. What is this? It's weird. Okay, so you are welcome, Sylvia. Got about 15 more minutes. I can continue to ramble if you guys want to hear me ramble. What else do we got going? More developments in the world of placement. I'm still exploring this. But currently, my current findings and conclusions. Thanks a lot. You explained everything extremely well. I learned so much from you this year. I really couldn't be any less glad. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad. That's why I'm here. Perfect. Well, thank you for watching and for attending the live streams and being part of the community. It's very important. Very much appreciated. Okay. And I have a lot more coming, so hopefully you'll continue to learn a lot more. But with placement, so for those of you who have seen my placement lesson, which I assume maybe most people here have, I was talking about how this idea of like where your voice is coming from, like in your chest or in your throat or whatever, as long as it's not like straight from the nose, I don't think it's very important, because it's like if you're speaking from here, they both sound natural, right? Thank you for the wonderful feedback and insight. See you next week. Yes. Okay. Bye. I was going to talk about this placement thing really quick, and then I'll leave if I don't get any more questions. But one thing I'm starting to realize is that there is something to placement, but the way that it's normally taught and this concept of like the voice coming from the chest and stuff is garbage. So I've realized that there's a default. I'm not even going to call it placement anymore necessarily. I want to call it tension. There's a default tongue tension and general sort of mouth tension, but especially in the tongue. The tongue is super, super important for this default tension because that affects the vowels so much. But also more recently, I found that there's also a default throat tension, which is kind of an abstract concept. It's not like how high the throat is or how low the throat is, because that affects your pitch. And that's a separate mechanic. But I was working, for example, I'm working with a Russian student right now, and he generally sounds quite good. Is very good pronunciation. But we're trying to work on those little details that are still missing. And so Russian placement, right, is supposed to be, a bit farther forward in the mouth, like Spanish. And so the first thing we did was, okay, let's try to relax down just to a little bit of tension, which I think is sort of the default tension in English, where it's not relaxed, right? It's relatively relaxed, but it's not relaxed. The schwa is not completely relaxed, guys. It's not. It's just, it feels relaxed to a native English speaker. Okay. So we tried that at first, and it sounded a little bit better, but there's still something a little bit off. And so we started trying to explore, because we were also playing with pitch, and he was trying to get pitch down, because apparently Russians don't use pitch very much. And we discovered through that actually there's something else going on with sort of the little bit of tension in the throat. And so you can sort of reset your tension, your throat tension, to nothing. Okay, now if I do that, which is very unnatural. Okay, so if I have pretty much no tension in my throat here, I sound largely the same, but it's a little breathy, because since I have no tension, I have no breath control. All the breath is just coming out. And so it sounds sort of like I'm a little bit out of breath. We discovered that when he's speaking Russian, again, it's not so much up, because it does sort of raise the pitch a little bit, like the default pitch, but it's not about raising the pitch. If he puts a little bit of tension in through here, or a little more than we would in English, then it works perfectly in Russian. But when he's speaking English, if he keeps that Russian tension, it's really subtle. I never even noticed it before, but now that we've compared it and we're starting to dig into this, I've noticed that he actually does sound better when he releases some of that tension, not all the way, but he releases some of that tension. So it seems that American English specifically, there's a very slight uniform tension across the tongue, regardless of what sound you're making. There's always going to be a little, so if the sound's up here, there's going to be a little bit of tension through here. If the sound like ah, there's going to be a little bit of tension here. It's always there. That's my conclusion so far. I still need to verify some of the details there, but that's what I found so far. And then in the throat, and again, it's a super small amount of tension. It's like there's dead snake, and then snake that's just holding itself up. Okay, tiny little bit of tension. In the throat, same thing. Okay, you don't want it to be completely relaxed, but you also don't want it to be tense. You want just a tiny little bit of tension, just to sort of, like say if your stomach, instead of letting your stomach just relax, you just kind of, pull it in a little bit, not like you're trying to suck it in, but you just, tighten it up a little bit to sit up straight. That's what you're trying to do with your throat. Just kind of tighten it a little bit. Okay. That gives you the breath control. And that also, so this concept, this idea of like speaking from your chest, I think is 110% complete garbage, like absolute garbage. Like I want to just like nuke this concept with a nuclear bomb, because that has nothing to do with American speech. Now, I think what's happening is that the teachers who teach this, I think they're noticing sort of a deeper sound. But what's really happening, right, if I put a little extra tension here, especially if I add a little extra tension to my tongue, and I start speaking a bit more like this, you can tell that my voice is slightly higher. So that creates the illusion that maybe I'm speaking from my throat, when actually I'm always speaking from my throat, regardless. Compared to being a little bit up here with a little bit more tension, if I just have a little tiny bit of tension, not all the way to no tension, just a little bit of tension, it creates the illusion that now I'm speaking from a deeper place when I'm not. So if I try to create sort of this higher tension where my voice is a little bit higher, like maybe Russian or Spanish might be, I can still speak from my chest. It's a little harder to do, but I can try to resonate from down here a bit. Okay. And it still kind of gets caught in the throat a bit. Now, if I go back to regular English and I try to open my throat or my chest a bit, I still feel the same vibration. It sounds a little bit deeper trying to open my chest, but this is more of a singing thing, I think. Like if I'm saying, or from my throat, okay, I can sort of place it, but when I'm normally speaking, I'm not speaking from my chest. All that does is make me sound more dramatic, right? So if I'm an announcer on TV and I say, make sure you buy this today, right? I'm trying to lower my tone. I'm trying to speak more from like in here, trying to get lots of, force going, lots of deep resonance. And it makes me sound more dramatic, right? But if I'm speaking Spanish, which is supposed to be a little higher, right? So if I'm more up here, si estoy hablando español, y si, if I'm announcing something, right, and I say, es el mejor producto del mundo, right? I'm trying to speak from my chest again, but I'm trying to keep a little bit more tension there. Es mejor producto del mundo, right? And maybe that to a native Spanish speaker, it sounds a little weird. I don't know. I'm not a native speaker, but I think speaking from your chest is something that you could do regardless of language. And the idea that American English is spoken from the chest, like that's the voice placement, is garbage. It's 100% garbage. That's my current perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm still exploring a bit, but I think that particular aspect of voice placement is complete garbage. At best, it's not a good way to explain it. It's a misleading way to explain it. To me or for me when giving an opinion. For example, for or to me, that's not as important. Good question. Very good question. Okay. There is a subtle but big difference between these two. They're both correct, but they mean two different things. If you say, and I can elaborate if you want, but the simplest way I can explain this, if you say, to me, that's not as important, you're saying, in my opinion, in my perspective, it's not as important as this other thing. If you say, for me, that's not as important, you're not saying, in my opinion, you're saying, in my situation, that's not as important. Okay, two completely different things. And the example I like to give for this is, so let's say Tom, right? Tom has a car that works perfectly fine. There's no problems with it. It has plenty of gas. He pays his insurance, right? He has a perfectly functioning car. There's nothing stopping him from using his car except his own choice, right? Okay. Now, Tom chooses to take the bus every day, even though it takes him longer to get to work and he has to deal with a lot of people that he doesn't like on the bus. Okay. Now, in that situation, I would say, does it make any sense for Tom to take the bus? Okay. That means, given the circumstance in Tom's situation where he has a perfectly working car and he doesn't have to take the bus, does that make sense for him to take the bus, right? For is either a basis or a purpose. In this case, it's a basis. Based on the situation, does it make sense? Or based on Tom and his situation, does it make sense to do this? Where same exact situation, if I say, does it make sense to Tom to take the bus? Now it sounds like you're like I'm asking you, like you know Tom, I don't know Tom, right? And I say, well, does it make sense to Tom to take the bus? Like, does Tom think it makes sense to take the bus? Right? Not doesn't make sense based on the situation, but in his head, does it make sense? Right? So it's a subtle difference, but you can see how it creates a completely different meaning. So context is super, super, super important. But that would be the basic difference. And again, it's rooted in the logic too. Between 2 and 4, especially depending on exactly what we're talking about, the exact use of 2 and 4, 2 and 4 are very closely tied under the surface. In fact, 2 took part of 4. When we say in order to, that's like for the purpose of, basically. And to is not supposed to be used as a purpose. It's always an endpoint of some sort, an abstract endpoint, a physical endpoint, like a destination. It's always an endpoint. Now, a purpose could be an endpoint, right? And for whatever reason, linguistically, historically, however English developed, to, when we use in order to, and we're talking about a purpose, that's where to steals the idea of purpose from for and points to it as an endpoint. Where most of the time, if you're talking about like a purpose, you're gonna use for. Like, what's it for? What's the purpose of this thing? So yeah, they're very closely tied, which causes the confusion because under the surface they are very closely tied together. Can the T in words like act or opt be replaced by a glottal stop? Well, I was talking about that a bit earlier. Yes, this if you don't push them out, the standard thing to do would probably be to stop them. Now, it could be a little hard to stop them. It depends, and it depends on what's after it. If there's a vowel, right? So if I say opt in to opt in, right? Because it sounds sort of like a D, but it's still technically a T. It's like a weak D kind of opt in. Now, if you try to stop it there and you say opt in, now it's more difficult to say by trying to stop it, right? That's why it's very dynamic. But if you say opt to take the bus, I'm going to choose that. I'm going to opt to take the bus. You can push out the T, opt to, or you can say opt to. I'm going to opt to take the bus because usually T plus T equals stop T plus push T, or pronounce T, pushed out. So, but yes, you can stop it. Is it true that in rapid speech, when two consonants that share the same place of articulation, the first one is elided? Yeah, elision, technical terms. Be dropped. I forget the exact meaning of a lot of these technical terms because I don't use them. Omission of an unstress. So dropping, basically. True that in rapid speech, when two consonants share the same place of articulation. Can you give me some examples? Off the top of my head, I would say no. That doesn't really make any sense. But if you can give me some examples, then we can work with that. Rapid speech. Okay, so rapid speech specifically. Yeah, I think I know where this question is coming from. And it would probably fall under shifting. Okay. So like with the what and did, how we can like drop the T and then do a flap D, whatted. The T is dropped and the D is flapped. Yeah. What do you do? Let's see. Okay, so in this particular case, yes, that works. But is that the explanation? Let's see. What if I say hate and doing that? I hate doing that. Okay. I hate doing that. I hate doing that. I hate doing that. You can drop the T there. Yeah. Now you're not flapping that D because it's at the start of a stress syllable. I hate doing that. But yeah, submarine, the B can be omitted. Okay. So that, okay, the first case with what and did, that's, I suppose under this sort of elision type thing, both of these, I guess, would fit. But I wouldn't think of it that way. The T and D thing, they share the same place. Yes. Wait, submarine. Okay, no, I'm thinking of something else. Sorry, I confused myself. Yes. Okay, so it's the same thing. Submarine. When we say submarine, even fully enunciated, unless we're really exaggerating the word, we don't say submarine. Okay, so there's not really a B there anyway, at least not a pushed out B. If we do like a stop B, submarine, or it's not completely stop, it's a held stop, not a glottal stop. Submarine. That would be like the standard fully pronounced way to do it. Can you completely drop the B and just do the M? Submarine. In faster speech, yes. No B at all, just the M. Summer. Submarine. So it would sound like summer, SUMMER, submarine. Yeah. In fast speech. Yeah. So I guess that would be true. Yes. Yeah, that wouldn't be shifting. Shifting is because I confused myself a bit. I was thinking of shifting where we're going from, like, say, the T to the P, and you're actually shifting the T into a P, or T to an M, you shift the T to a P. Like what pick. But that's not what we're talking about here. Okay, anyway, yeah, so I have to go. Good questions. That's a good point. I'm gonna look a little bit more into that. I think that might be one that I missed. Maybe I talked about it in that lesson. I don't remember. There were so many little rules in that lesson I made that I don't remember everything I put in there. It's hard to keep track of all these little rules off the top of your head. So good. Thank you guys very much. If there are any other questions, let me know next week. You can also post them at the bottom of this video if you want, or in the comments of this video, and I'll try to answer them. But otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Christmas is coming up, so I hope you all have a great month. Don't spend too much on Christmas presents. You're very welcome, Sergio. And yeah, see you next week. And